Chapter 1764. The power of the Chaos Ring was so great that it had created a spatial storm. She had then turned into Bailey Hongzhuang. All of this had been caused by the Chaos Ring. As for why it had chosen Bailey Hongzhuang, it was probably because they had coincidentally bumped into Bailey Hongzhuang at that time. Sometimes she felt that all of this had been predestined. After all, their names were exactly the same. This coincidence was far too rare. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's explanation, Di Beichen finally understood. After his wife had fallen, her soul had directly entered Bailey Hongzhuang's body. That was how all of this had happened. After I entered Bailey Hongzhuang's body, I had also merged with her memories. Therefore, I can only say that the current me is a combination of my past life and Bailey Hongzhuang's. Her soul had long been merged with the memories of these two lives. Therefore, both of them were her but not completely her. Di Beichen was a little stunned. This news was far too shocking. He simply could not believe that something like this had actually happened. Bailey Hongzhuang stared at Di Beichen. When she saw that Di Beichen had been staring at her in a daze without any reaction, her clear eyes could not help but fill with a trace of worry. She did not know if Di Beichen could accept all of this. She had been very conflicted before she had brought up this matter. Anyone who had heard of this matter would find it hard to believe. Even though this matter was very hard to believe, Di Beichen had quickly digested it and understood it. Di Beichen raised his eyes and saw the worry in Bailey Hongzhuang's clear eyes. He immediately pulled Bailey Hongzhuang into his arms. Her worry made his heart ache. He had never wanted Hongzhuang to feel anxious because of him. Suddenly being pulled into Di Beichen's arms, Bailey Hongzhuang was slightly stunned. The worry in her eyes gradually wavered. Di Beichen gently patted Bailey Hongzhuang's back. His warm and mellow voice rang in Bailey Hongzhuang's ears. "My wife, no matter who you are, no matter if you're from 1,000 years ago or 1,000 years later, to me you're still my wife. Your identity will not change anything." His warm and magnetic voice seemed to have a mysterious power, inexplicably calming Bailey Hongzhuang's heart. Di Beichen's words put her heart down again, and Bailey Hongzhuang's lips could not help but raise a happy smile. Her judgment was not wrong. Di Beichen would not care about these things. Even if Di Beichen knew the truth, it would not affect anything. As Di Beichen stroked Bailey Hongzhuang's back, he suddenly thought of something. His eyes could not help but turn gloomy. Sensing Di Beichen's strange behavior, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but withdraw from his arms and look at Di Beichen. Di Beichen's face was as gloomy as water. His eyes, which were as deep as the sea, were now covered with dark clouds. His eyes were unreadable, making it impossible for anyone to see through his thoughts. Bailey Hongzhuang stared at Di Beichen and could not help but feel worried. "Beichen, what's wrong with you? Does she still care about this after all?" Di Beichen's hand suddenly grabbed Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulders. His eyes, which were as attractive as black holes, were fixed on Bailey Hongzhuang. "My wife, you weren't married in the past, were you?" Chapter 1765. Looking at Di Beichen's nervous and perturbed look, Bailey Hongzhuang's heart, which had been hanging in the air again, calmed down. She felt that it was very funny. When she saw Di Beichen's dignified look earlier, she thought that it was something important. She did not expect that Di Beichen was actually thinking about her marriage. This man's concern was not the main point at all. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows and looked at Di Beichen. A sly look quietly appeared in her eyes. Usually when Di Beichen teased her, she could not resist at all. Now she finally had a chance to tease Di Beichen. "If I say I was married in the past, what will you do?" Bailey Hongzhuang looked a little nervous. She looked at Di Beichen worriedly as if it was difficult for her to speak. As soon as she said that, Di Beichen's face suddenly darkened. His eyes were even more oppressive and cold. Time seemed to have suddenly frozen. Only the sound of Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen's breathing could be heard in the room. It was indescribably oppressive. Di Beichen did not care about who Hongzhuang was in the past. The only thing he cared about was whether Hongzhuang had someone else in her heart. However, now that he knew that Hongzhuang was married in the past, didn't this mean that Hongzhuang also had a man she loved deeply in the past? At the thought of this, Di Beichen could not help but tighten his grip on Bailey Hongzhuang's arm. He never thought that something like this would happen. He only felt a stuffy feeling in his heart which made him panic. No matter how serious his injuries were, he had never felt so uncomfortable. Bailey Hongzhuang felt a pain coming from her arm. Di Beichen had used too much strength. She only wanted to make a joke, but after seeing Di Beichen's dignified expression, she felt that her joke seemed to have gone too far. The corners of Bailey Hongzhuang's lips slowly spread into a smile. Her eyes were bright and full of color, blooming like stars in the sky. Beichen, are you jealous? Looking at the smile on Bailey Hongzhuang's face, especially after seeing the sly look in Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes, how could Di Beichen, who was smart, not know that Hongzhuang did it on purpose? Wife, are you lying to me? Di Beichen raised his voice. What Hongzhuang had just said really shocked him. This unexpected situation happened too suddenly, completely out of her expectations. For a moment he did not know what to do. He only felt a wave of pain. However, Hongzhuang was only teasing him. At the thought of this, Di Beichen's eyes became increasingly gloomy. His wife was becoming more and more disobedient. She actually dared to lie to him about this kind of thing. Hee hee. Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but chuckle. When she saw Di Beichen's face, which was as black as the bottom of a pot, she found it even more hilarious. Beichen, you're too cute, haha. She had never seen Di Beichen like this. It was simply too amusing. However, at the same time, Bailey Hongzhuang was deeply moved. Di Beichen did not care about anything else. The only thing he cared about was her feelings. This was really touching. However, when Di Beichen saw Bailey Hongzhuang's smiling face, he only felt that it was time to discipline Hongzhuang. She actually dared to lie to him about this kind of thing. In the next moment, Di Beichen exerted force with both hands and carried Bailey Hongzhuang to sit on his lap. Chapter 1766. The atmosphere became ambiguous in an instant. Bailey Hongzhuang's white face was instantly covered with a blush. The position in front of her was too ambiguous. The next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang immediately wanted to go down, but Di Beichen's broad palm had been holding her slender waist. The strong and overbearing force did not allow her to leave. Di Beichen looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in front of him with a deep and penetrating gaze. His wife was getting more and more naughty. She even dared to make such a joke with him. He had to properly punish his wife. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Di Beichen angrily. He was really bad. Knowing that she had no way to deal with such a situation, he deliberately used such a way to punish her. Let me down. Bailey Hongzhuang struggled. This kind of situation made her feel at a loss. Although she was extremely close to Di Beichen, this was the first time they were in such an ambiguous position. They were so close, separated only by a thin cloth. Faintly, she could feel the heat from Di Beichen, which made her feel helpless. Di Beichen originally just wanted to tease Bailey Hongzhuang, but after seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's shy and helpless appearance, the desire in his heart immediately jumped up. At this moment, coupled with the constant twisting, he only felt that his body was about to explode. His wife was simply igniting fire everywhere. Di Beichen grabbed Bailey Hongzhuang's small hand and said, "Wife, if you continue to move like this, I can't guarantee what will happen next." When he opened his mouth, there was a hint of hoarseness. Di Beichen's eyes were instantly dyed with the light of desire. His eyes were blurred and domineering as he looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. Last time they were disturbed by Xia Jiqing and the others, but now it was only them. Listening to Di Beichen's words, Bailey Hongzhuang immediately understood the meaning of Di Beichen, and immediately did not dare to move. Because she also felt that there was a change in Di Beichen's body, Di Beichen looked at Bailey Hongzhuang, who was smiling proudly and became an obedient kitten in a short time, and his lips could not help but raise a smile. "Wife, do you dare to tease me in the future?" Bailey Hongzhuang's face was so red that it could drip water. At this moment, when she saw Di Beichen's teasing look, she could not help but feel ashamed. Damn Di Beichen. Every time I was defeated by his hands. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang pursing her lips and looking unwilling, Di Beichen's eyes gradually deepened. He raised his eyebrows and said, "It seems that the wife is still unwilling to admit defeat." The next moment, Di Beichen's figure suddenly moved. Ah! In the blink of an eye, Di Beichen had already carried Bailey Hongzhuang to the bed. At this moment, their posture was more ambiguous than before. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Di Beichen with shame. At this moment, Di Beichen was already on top of her, and her legs were still separated. Di Beichen leaned forward, and the hot part was so close to her that she could not help but shiver. Although the last time she and Di Beichen had been in a state of delirium, after all, they had not reached this step. At this moment, when she was really in this situation, she knew how embarrassing it was. She only felt that her mind was blank, and she stared at Di Beichen, not knowing what to say. Chapter 1767. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang like this, Di Beichen could not hold back the excitement in his heart. He immediately kissed Bailey Hongzhuang's red lips. Her soft red lips were filled with an enchanting fragrance. Once he kissed her, he would be intoxicated. Di Beichen's kiss was wild and hot, with a trace of dominance and possessiveness. He searched for Bailey Hongzhuang's body and played with it. He was glad. He was glad that his wife had transmigrated into Bailey Hongzhuang's body. If not for that, everything that happened later would not have happened. His heart would still be so empty. There would not be a ray of warm sunlight shining on his heart like Hongzhuang. He was even more glad that his wife had not married in her previous life. There was no one else in her heart. Otherwise, it would be too difficult to completely defeat the person from 1,000 years ago in his wife's heart. Thinking of all these, Di Beichen wanted Bailey Hongzhuang even more. He wanted her. He wanted her crazily. Even though she was by his side now, he still felt a sense of crisis in his heart. The equally outstanding Mo Yunjue was watching covetously from the side. For Hongzhuang's matter, Mo Yunjue was also giving his all. He did not mention this problem, but it did not mean that he was not worried. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were blurred. From the initial embarrassment to Di Beichen's kiss, the ambiguous atmosphere was spreading. Her body temperature was also rising. She responded to Di Beichen with a jerky but passionate response. From Di Beichen's kiss, she keenly felt a trace of worry and uneasiness. She did not know what had caused Di Beichen's uneasiness. To her, she only wanted Di Beichen to feel at ease. Feeling Bailey Hongzhuang's response, Di Beichen's kiss became more intense. From her red lips to Di Beichen's slender white neck. His warm breath sprayed on Bailey Hongzhuang's neck. She only felt her body go limp as if she had no strength in her body. Fine and dense kisses fell on Bailey Hongzhuang's body. Di Beichen's breathing became more rapid and heavy. His hand slowly reached into Bailey Hongzhuang's clothes. Feeling the delicate and tender skin, Bailey Hongzhuang's body ignited everywhere. Bailey Hongzhuang's little face flushed red. She could only let Di Beichen do what he wanted, but she did not know what to do. Di Beichen's hands seemed to have magic. Wherever his hands touched, the skin would emit an astonishing heat. Di Beichen only felt that every inch of Bailey Hongzhuang's skin had a fatal attraction to him. For so many years, he had been surrounded by many women, but none of them had ever moved his heart. Furthermore, he had always been a chaste person. Therefore, no woman had ever appeared by his side. There was only one woman that he could not restrain himself from, and that was his wife. 2 years ago he had not been so thirsty. After not seeing Hongzhuang for 2 years, he felt that he could not restrain himself anymore. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang was at a loss of what to do, Di Beichen held Bailey Hongzhuang's little hand and put it into his clothes. When she touched Di Beichen's strong and smooth skin, Bailey Hongzhuang found that Di Beichen's body temperature was even hotter than hers. It was as if a flame was burning her palm. As Bailey Hongzhuang's soft and boneless little hand covered his chest, Di Beichen only felt that he had touched a piece of ice in the flame. He felt very comfortable. Chapter 1768. In the next moment, Di Beichen directly grabbed Bailey Hongzhuang's small hand and felt his scalding heat. When Bailey Hongzhuang realized what she was touching, she only felt a bang in her mind, and then there was only a blank space left. Although she didn't know much about the matters between men and women, she knew what this was. Following the touch of Bailey Hongzhuang's small hand, Di Beichen only felt that he was about to explode. This feeling was really killing him. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but close her eyes. Her face was so red that it was about to drip blood. She immediately tried to pull her hand away. Di Beichen had already guessed Bailey Hongzhuang's thoughts. How could he allow her to pull her hand away? He held on tightly to Bailey Hongzhuang's hand, not allowing her to retreat even an inch. Beichen. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but call out softly. This situation was really too embarrassing. Di Beichen raised his eyes that were filled with lust. Those reddened eyes and the beads of sweat on his forehead showed that he was having a hard time holding himself back. Seeing Di Beichen like this, Bailey Hongzhuang's original words were stuck in her mouth and she didn't say anything. The moment Di Beichen's hand touched Bailey Hongzhuang's leg, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but tremble. That limp and numb feeling made her moan uncontrollably. And it was this sound that made Di Beichen, who was already unable to hold himself back, completely ignited. He reached his hand into Bailey Hongzhuang's skirt. He only felt that everything on his body was unnecessary. Beichen, I guess that you were in the cultivation room. I heard that you had already brought your precious wife back from the assessment. But it's been so long, why didn't you let me see her? Isn't that too much? A carefree and sunny voice sounded from above the training room, followed by a series of movements. Hearing this sudden voice, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but be surprised. She never thought that someone would appear at this time. From the looks of it, The other party seemed to be very familiar with this cultivation room. Judging from the commotion, it was clear that he was about to enter the cultivation room. Damn it. Baichen's voice was hoarse as he slammed his fist onto the edge of the bed. This guy just had to come at this time. She had disturbed him. Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but look at her and Baichen's disheveled and messy appearance. The other party was clearly coming down directly. What should they do if they saw him? Thinking of this, Bailey Hongzhuang immediately pushed Baichen. Her moist and blurry eyes were filled with nervousness and panic. What should we do? She had never encountered such a situation before and could not help but feel flustered. Baichen glanced at Bailey Hongzhuang and said, "Wen Ziren, I dare you to come down here right now." Wen Ziren was just about to enter the cultivation room in high spirits when he suddenly heard Baichen's shout. He could not help but be stunned for a moment. All along, Baichen's personality had been rather good. It was rare to see him so furious. Could it be that he had been dumped by his precious wife? Although Wen Ziren didn't quite understand, he still stopped himself from going downstairs. He and Baichen had been good friends for many years. Their masters were good friends as well. Hence, they had often cultivated together when they were young. Chapter 1769. Among the peers he was the one who knew Baichen the best. Although everyone believed that Han Shilling and Baichen were a couple, as a good brother of Baichen, he knew very well that Baichen had no romantic feelings for Han Shilling. At the beginning he also felt that Baichen was very strange. He was obviously very outstanding and there were many outstanding women in Tiangang's sect, but Baichen didn't like any of them. Until 2 years ago when he learned from Baichen that Baichen already had a wife, he couldn't help but be stunned. He had known Baichen for so many years, and he had never seen Baichen fall in love with any woman. He even felt that if this continued, Baichen was likely to die alone. However, just when he didn't pay attention, Baichen had already married someone. This news was simply too shocking. However, as he and Baichen had an in-depth conversation, he found that Baichen was really trapped this time. As a good brother of Baichen, he naturally understood how his good brother's vision was. Therefore he had always wanted to see Baichen's baby wife. At the beginning this guy said that he would let him see after Bailey Hongzhuang was brought back, but he waited for so long without any movement so he came to Tiangang's sect. He was very familiar with Tiangang's sect, and he was even more familiar with Baichen's palace. As long as this guy wasn't in his own room, he must be in the cultivation room, so he came without hesitation. However, why did this guy suddenly lose his temper at him now? After seeing that there was no movement upstairs, Bailey Hongzhuang was relieved. If someone saw her like this now, then she really had no face to see anyone. Baichen's face was gloomy and scary. Did this group of damn guys specially choose the time every time? Appearing at this critical moment, he was so depressed that he wanted to hit someone. Looking at the gloomy face of Bailey Hongzhuang, the originally flustered and nervous Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly couldn't help but laugh. Thinking about it, the most depressed person was Baichen. Previously, Baichen was out of control in order to punish her. She didn't expect that the person who was punished in the end was Baichen. Noticing that Bailey Hongzhuang's lips couldn't help but overflow a smile Baichen's eyes, his wife was still in the mood to laugh now. "Get up quickly. If you wait too long, others will be suspicious," Bailey Hongzhuang said. She didn't know who the other party was, but since the other party knew about the existence of the cultivation room, he must be very familiar with it. Who cares what he thinks? Baichen didn't care about this at all. Just looking at his little girl's complacent appearance, his heart felt stifled. In the next moment, Baichen once again covered Bailey Hongzhuang's body. Seeing Baichen's actions, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but panic. Now that the situation was like this, Baichen wouldn't continue, right? Thinking that there was another person above who could come down at any time, she couldn't help but feel anxious. "Seeing that you're so proud, I'll give you a punishment." Baichen's hoarse and hot voice sounded in Bailey Hongzhuang's ears. Then Bailey Hongzhuang felt a numbing sensation on her neck. Baichen directly pecked her. He had to let his wife know that it wouldn't be so easy to tease him in the future. Chapter 1770. My dear wife, this is punishment. Baichen smiled faintly, but the lust in his eyes had yet to dissipate. He was going to have a good spar with Ziren later. Otherwise, how was he going to vent his anger that had transformed from lust? Looking at Baichen's smirk, Bailey Hongzhuang understood what had happened. "You scoundrel!" Bailey Hongzhuang cried out angrily. Her little face was filled with shame and anger. She stretched out her little fist and was about to hit Beichen. It was the cool season now and the dress she was wearing was very thin. Her neck was completely exposed. Beichen had left a mark on her neck. How was she going to face anyone? These words coming out of Bailey Hongzhuang's mouth did not sound disgusted at all. On the contrary, it sounded more like a spoiled child. Beichen immediately grabbed Bailey Hongzhuang's soft and seemingly boneless little hand. His body moved closer to her and he whispered into her ear, "Today an untactful fellow has disturbed us. I promise that next time, I will not allow such an untactful fellow to appear." Once these words were spoken, Bailey Hongzhuang immediately understood the meaning behind Beichen's words. Her little face, which was already flushed red, was now filled with a blood-red hue. Beichen's words meant that next time, tidy yourself up properly. You can't let that fellow's eyes take advantage of you. Beichen's face was gloomy. Obviously, the matter of being disturbed at such a crucial moment was not something that could be easily forgotten. Bailey Hongzhuang saw how petty Beichen was and the corners of her lips could not help but curl into a smile. Even though Beichen was so naughty that she could not stand up to him at a time like this, he was really cute. While Bailey Hongzhuang was tidying up her clothes, Beichen began to circulate his cultivation method. If he did not do this, he would not be able to suppress his lust at all. However, the lust that had been suppressed for so long was obviously not something that could be eliminated so easily. He could only circulate his cultivation method over and over again. After Bailey Hongzhuang tidied herself up, she could not help but take out a mirror. She saw a bright red mark on her neck which was extremely eye-catching. Bailey Hongzhuang tried to use her hair to cover it. However, this position could only cover a small part of it. The slightest movement would expose it. Beichen did this on purpose. Bailey Hongzhuang was indignant. She didn't know when this imprint would disappear. It seems that she could only stay in the house for a while and not go out. Not long after Beichen calmed down, he and Bailey Hongzhuang walked out of the cultivation room together. When Ziren was bored to death in the room. He did not understand what Beichen was doing and why he had not come up after so long. Under such circumstances, he could not resist the idea of opening the mechanism and walking into the cultivation room. Just as Ziren was about to enter the cultivation room, Beichen finally walked out. Seeing Beichen appear, Ziren could not help but ask, "Beichen, what are you doing in the cultivation room? Why did you take so long to come up?" Just as he finished speaking, when Ziren saw a beautiful and refined woman appear behind Beichen. Suddenly, when Ziren's attention fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. He had already heard that Beichen's wife was as beautiful as a fairy. He had always been curious. He did not know what kind of beauty could make Beichen so proud. Chapter 1771. When Ziren could not help but recall Beichen's angry voice from before. Could it be that his appearance had coincidentally disturbed Beichen's good time? At the thought of this, when Ziren's probing gaze could not help but shift back and forth between Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang. Feeling Ziren's ambiguous gaze, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but feel a little guilty. Recalling everything that had happened in the cultivation room earlier, she felt her face blush and her heart beat faster. When Bailey Hongzhuang's head was slightly lowered, when Ziren immediately saw the mark on Bailey Hongzhuang's neck. Immediately, the smile in his eyes became even more complacent. He and Beichen had been good friends for so many years, but he had never seen Beichen so furious. He did not intentionally disturb them. Who asked Beichen to be so indecent in broad daylight? Noticing Ziren's smiling eyes, Bailey Hongzhuang felt as if when Ziren had seen through everything from before. "What are you looking at?" Beichen's face was calm and his voice was slightly cold. When Ziren sized up Beichen and smiled, "Looking at your dissatisfied expression, could it be that I've disturbed your good time and that's why you're so angry?" Following when Ziren's words, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but cough. Who was this man in front of her? He really dared to say anything. She knew that he had seen through everything. Beichen's face darkened even more. "When Ziren, I've recently learned a new martial technique. Come with me to the training field and we'll exchange pointers." Once these words came out, Ziren's face could not help but change. He hurriedly said, "Beichen, you know that you're stronger than me. I've long stopped exchanging pointers with you." Beichen's talent in cultivation had always been enviable. Although he did not work as hard as Beichen in cultivation, to be honest, if they were to really fight, he really would not be a match for Beichen. "You know that you won't exchange pointers with me and yet you dare to disturb my good time. Today, I must exchange pointers with you properly to practice." Beichen calmly walked out. He was almost depressed to death. The last time he was disturbed by Xia Jiqing and the others at the Kanglan College, this time he thought that there would be no such problem in his own palace. Who would have thought that a damn when Xiren would come out again? This guy did not appear earlier or later, he just had to appear at the most terrible time. Now he even dared to make fun of him? Bailey Hongzhuang stared at Di Beichen and Wen Xiren. These two men were so blunt when they spoke. Since when was this kind of thing allowed to be said out in the open? Even if Xiren had seen through them before, as long as they did not admit it, they could at least be perfunctory. Now that Di Beichen said this, wasn't that admitting it? Bailey Hongzhuang only felt a burst of heat on her face. She was so embarrassed that she did not know how to face people. Seeing Di Beichen's serious look, Wen Xiren also had a bitter face. He could not help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang. Miss Bailey, it seems that Di Beichen is serious now. If I can't hold on for a while, you must help me. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Wen Xiren, who had a sad look on his face. Her expression was a bit embarrassed and she did not know how to answer. Obviously Xiren knew her and Di Beichen very well. Looking at this posture, he should be a good friend of Di Beichen. Chapter 1772. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang nod in agreement, Wen Xiren let out a sigh of relief and followed Di Beichen out. This guy is still a virgin even after holding it in for more than 10 years. Now that he finally had a chance, I messed it up. A man who is not satisfied with his desires can be very scary when he releases his anger. Sigh, I didn't check the almanac when I went out today. I have to be careful next time. Bailey Hongzhuang was speechless. Wen Xiren's words really made her speechless. Not satisfied with his desires? Virgin? Bailey Hongzhuang was confused. Where did Di Beichen get such a blabbermouth friend? Stop being so long-winded. Di Beichen's angry voice came from the front. Xiren also hurriedly followed. Bailey Hongzhuang saw this and after thinking for a moment, she also followed. Until now, she didn't have many opportunities to see Di Beichen fight. If she could see Di Beichen and Xiren fight today, it would be a very good thing. At the back of Di Beichen's palace, there was a training field. This was the place where he usually practiced his martial arts. After Di Beichen stood in the middle of the training field, his gaze fell on Xiren. Come, let's compare notes. Looking at Di Beichen's cold and gloomy face, Wen Xiren knew that he wouldn't have a good time. Beichen, let's talk things out. A gentleman uses his mouth and not his fists. Your precious wife is still here. Aren't you afraid that your selfish desire to make a move on a good friend of many years will make her change her view of you? As he spoke, Xiren signaled to Di Beichen that Bailey Hongzhuang was not far away. Di Beichen glanced at Bailey Hongzhuang, then looked at Xiren with eyes full of anger. My wife must also think that you are very annoying. I am helping her vent her anger. Bailey Hongzhuang had just arrived at the training field when she heard Di Beichen's words. She couldn't help but look at Di Beichen with shame and anger. Di Beichen was said to be unsatisfied. But now that he said this, didn't it mean that she was also unsatisfied? When Xiren was slightly stunned and couldn't help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. Besides, it's been 2 years. I understand. Bailey Hongzhuang only felt that it was a mistake for her to come here. Di Beichen didn't waste time talking nonsense with Xiren. He raised his right hand and a sharp sword appeared. He immediately attacked Wen Xiren. Seeing this, Xiren also took out his own weapon. It had been a long time since he had sparred with Di Beichen. Now that he had the chance to spar, it was good. Vigorous elemental energy exploded in an instant. Both of them were in the green realm. If Bailey Hongzhuang was not wrong, they should be in the 5th level of the green realm. Di Beichen and Xiren were able to reach the 5th level of the green realm at such a young age. It was obvious that both of them were extremely talented in cultivation. As the young master of the Tiangang sect, Di Beichen's outstanding strength was very shocking. Bailey Hongzhuang thought to herself that Wen Xiren might be the successor of some sect. After all, the saying birds of a feather flock together made sense. Those who could become good brothers with the successor of a sect might very well be of the same status. The Green Realm cultivators were extremely powerful. The moment the two of them made a move, just the surging origin energy alone was enough to make one's heart tremble. In the next moment, the two figures, one gold and one blue, quickly collided. Ding ding ding. Chapter 1773. It was as if there were 2 gusts of wind whistling in front of his eyes. Fierce and biting cold origin energy poured out in torrents, shooting out traces in the ground. Bailey Hongzhuang was a distance away from the two of them. The stronger the cultivation, the wider the range of impact. Not to mention that the two of them had similar cultivation, so it was naturally impossible to determine who was superior in a short period of time. Although the two of them fought like a raging fire, it was impossible to determine the final result for a while. However, with Bailey Hongzhuang's eyesight, she was able to determine that the one who had the upper hand in the end was still Di Beichen. After confirming that Di Beichen would obtain the final victory, Bailey Hongzhuang leisurely waited at the side for the final result. This when Ziren was so outspoken, it was good for Di Beichen to teach him a lesson. Bailey Hongzhuang thought naughtily. The sounds of fighting coming from Di Beichen's palace did not cause an uproar in Tiangang's sect, because the young sect master's palace would occasionally have such battle waves. Cloud Sword Sect's young sect master came to find our young sect master again. Their relationship is really good. Cloud Sword Sect's young sect master and our young sect master have been good friends since young. In addition, Tiangang sect and Cloud Sword sect have always been on good terms, so it's normal for their relationship to be so good. In the future, when young sect master and Cloud Sword sect's young sect master both become sect masters, I presume our relationship with Cloud Sword sect will be even closer. Di Beichen and Wen Ziren were good brothers who had played together since young. Any cultivator who had stayed in Tiangang sect for a period of time would know. Di Beichen, didn't we agree not to hit people's faces? Hey, stop. Even if I interrupted your good deed, you wouldn't go so far as to treat me like this, right? You're also choosing a lover over a friend. You and I have been friends for more than 10 years. Wen Ziren kept begging for mercy, but Di Beichen did not care at all. At this moment, both of their weapons had already been put aside. Wen Ziren's neck was clamped by Di Beichen's left hand, and his fist was facing Wen Ziren's face. He knew that this guy cared the most about his face. In order to let this guy remember, he would hit his face. Sister-in-law, come help me. Seeing Di Beichen, Wen Ziren hurriedly. Calm. Bailey Hongzhuang also came to Di Beichen and Wen Ziren's side. Previously, the two of them were fighting fiercely. She did not expect them to become so noisy now. It was really interesting. Even though it was her first time meeting Ziren, but from the interaction between Ziren and Di Beichen, she knew that the two of them had a very good relationship. She did not know Di Beichen's friend before. Today she finally met one of them. She was very happy. Sister-in-law? After hearing Ziren's name, Di Beichen could not help but narrow his eyes. You're really... In fact, Ziren and Di Beichen had been arguing about who was the older brother and who was the younger brother since they were young. The two of them were the same age and there was not much of a difference in months. When Ziren's birthday was naturally known, but Di Beichen's birthday, when Si Tian brought Di Beichen back, he only saw his age but did not know the specific time. It was because of this that the two of them had been arguing about who was the older brother since they were young. Until now they had not been able to compete. Chapter 1774. Only to see Wen Ziren with two panda eyes, where was the elegant appearance from before? Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but look at Di Beichen. He did it on purpose. Di Beichen whispered in Bailey Hongzhuang's ear, who asked him to disturb my good thing. Obviously Di Beichen had a huge grudge towards this matter. Bailey Hongzhuang's pretty face flushed red, but at the same time she felt it was extremely funny. She was a man and when she saw Di Beichen being so petty, it just had to be on this kind of matter. Ziren looked at Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang flirting, and the resentment in his eyes couldn't help but deepen. You two are really unrestrained. Was it easy for him? Wasn't he just curious about how Di Beichen's precious wife looked like, so he specially came to take a look? Who would have thought that the timing was so unlucky? Di Beichen swept a glance at Ziren, then said to Bailey Hongzhuang, Wife, this is Cloud Sword Sect's young sect leader, Wen Ziren. Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang revealed an expression of understanding. Looks like her judgment was indeed correct. This man was similarly the young sect leader of a sect. Cloud Sword Sect was one of the top 10 sects, and cultivators mainly cultivated swords. This point, at that time during the assessment competition, Elder Gu had once introduced it and she also remembered it clearly. Young sect leader 1. Bailey Hongzhuang spoke out. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's address, Wen Ziren waved his hand and said, You're Beichen's wife, we'll all be good friends in the future, so there's no need to be so polite. Just directly call me by my name. Bailey Hongzhuang was slightly stunned. She couldn't help but look at Di Beichen. Di Beichen smiled and said, This guy will come to Tiangang sect from time to time. There will be many opportunities to meet in the future. Just call him Ziren. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Alright, then I'll call you Ziren. When Ziren acted like they were close friends. Then I'll call you Hongzhuang from now on. All right. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. Although this was her first time meeting Xiren, she had a very good impression of Xiren. Just from the previous contact, she could tell that Xiren was a very easy person to get along with. Why did you come to Tiangang sect again today? After beating up Xiren, Di Beichen's mood was obviously much better, so he immediately asked. Didn't I say it before? I'm here to meet your precious wife. When Xiren looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and then at Di Beichen. Now that you've met her, she's really compatible with you. However, Di Beichen didn't believe Xiren. I've known you for so many years, how can I not know what you're thinking? This is at most part of the reason. Did you have a fight with Yingying? He and Wen Xiren had been friends for many years, so he knew Wen Xiren's affairs very well. Although Xiren was very curious to see Hongzhuang before, this kind of thing would happen sooner or later. When Xiren wouldn't make a special trip. Usually, there was only one reason that could make Xiren come so far to find him, Shangguan Yingying. Seeing that Di Beichen had seen through everything, Wen Xiren couldn't help but sigh. A little fight, no problem. Sure enough, Di Beichen's lips raised a faint smile. He watched Xiren and Shangguan Yingying walk over step by step. These two people were really a pair of enemies. Bailey Hongzhuang curiously looked at Xiren and Di Beichen. Obviously, Yingying was a very important person. Chapter 1775. In my opinion, it won't be long before Yingying appears in Tiangang sect. Di Beichen smiled faintly. Whether it was when Xiren or Shangguan Yingying, he knew them very well. When the two of them got along together, it wouldn't be long before they quarreled. However, the speed at which they reconciled was equally astonishing. Now he was already used to it. This was the way the two of them got along. When Xiren raised his eyebrows and didn't speak. The two of you are really interesting. Every time you quarrel, you come to me. You treat my Tiangang sect as a refuge. Di Beichen looked at Wen Xiren helplessly. He had no intention of getting involved in these things. However, every time something happened between the two of them, they would come to Tiangang sect. When they were not married, the two of them also came to him when they quarreled. Now after they were married, they still came to him when they quarreled. He was really helpless. Looking at Di Beichen's helpless look, Wen Xiren couldn't help but say, in the future when you and Hongzhuang quarrel and come to me, I will take you in. Hearing this, Di Beichen directly held Bailey Hongzhuang with one hand and raised his long eyebrows. My wife and I will not be like you. When Xiren looked at such a proud Di Beichen and was completely speechless. Was this still the Di Beichen he knew before? The Di Beichen he knew before was never like this. He couldn't help but sigh. Sure enough, after a man had a wife, he would change his face. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help laughing. The conversation between the two men was also very funny. This was the affection that grew up together. No matter how the other party ridiculed and sarcastic, it still couldn't hurt the affection between them. You'd better stay in your own room. When Yingying comes, you solve it yourself. Di Beichen glanced at Wen Xiren indifferently. On this issue he really couldn't help. Wen Xiren pondered for a moment when he heard this, and then he could only sigh. He understood that Di Beichen had no idea how to deal with this. Wen Xiren was obviously not in a good mood. After messing around for a while, he went back to his room to rest. Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang also went back to the cultivation room together. At this moment, after entering the cultivation room, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but think of the charming scene from before, and two red clouds once again appeared on her face. After Di Beichen noticed Bailey Hongzhuang's rosy face, he couldn't help but smile. Wife, what are you thinking about? No, nothing. Under Di Beichen's pair of eyes that could see through people's hearts, Bailey Hongzhuang only felt that she had nowhere to hide. How about, we continue what we didn't finish just now? Di Beichen looked at Bailey Hongzhuang teasingly, his tone was very ambiguous. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but reach out and hit Di Beichen. You're shameless. Xiren is not far away. As long as we don't look for him now, he won't dare to disturb us. Di Beichen approached Bailey Hongzhuang, his smile was full of ambiguity and teasing. Bailey Hongzhuang knew that she was no match for Di Beichen in this aspect, so she didn't continue to stay on this topic. Who is Yingying? Bailey Hongzhuang asked. Shangguan Yingying, she is Xiren's wife. The two of them are childhood sweethearts. We have known each other for many years. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang also understood. Chapter 1776. There's a conflict between them. Should we help mediate it? Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Di Beichen. Xiren no longer stayed in Cloud Sword sect and ran to Tiangang's sect. Presumably the conflict was not small. Since they were Di Beichen's good friends, it would be great if there was a chance to help mediate it. Di Beichen looked at his wife's kind appearance, and his deep eyes were filled with gentleness. His wife had always been kind. It was only when facing some enemies that she was decisive and ruthless. Hong Zhuang had always been very harmonious with her friends. Don't worry about them. They get along like this. After so many years they have long been used to it. Not only them, even I, as a spectator, have been used to it. The low and magnetic voice was filled with helplessness and lamentation. These two guys really couldn't stop at any time. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were still flickering with some doubts, Di Beichen smiled and immediately explained. When I was a few years old I already knew Xiren and Yingying. They were engaged since they were young. The two of them have always quarreled every 5 days and had a small quarrel every 3 days. Xiren couldn't win against Yingying at all. Therefore, every time he couldn't win against her, he would come to my place. Yingying would also chase after him. In the past, before they were married, Yingying had always followed behind Xiren like a little tail. However, the two of them are not people who hold grudges. Even if they quarrel fiercely at this moment, they would become glued to each other in a while. Therefore they often startled the people around them, but the two of them acted as if nothing had happened. I'm already used to it. You will also get used to it in the future. Don't worry about it. It will be fine in 2 days. Seeing that Di Beichen was full of confidence as if he was used to it, Bailey Hongzhuang also smiled and nodded. Obviously, Xiren and Shangguan Yingying were quarrelsome lovers. When they were together they could not help but quarrel. But once they were separated they would miss each other very much. This kind of feeling was also a rare and precious kind of love. No matter how much they quarreled, the other party would always be in their hearts. I understand. Although Xiren looked gentle and refined, he spoke without thinking. It was normal for Yingying to be at odds with him. She was curious about what Yingying looked like. By the way, Beichen, I haven't finished what I wanted to tell you. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but speak up. What she wanted to tell Di Beichen the most was about the primordial chaos ring. The door of darkness in the chaos ring would be of great help to their cultivation. After she told Di Beichen about this, they would be able to cultivate in the door of darkness together. Having more time was a good thing for any cultivator. This way they would be able to do more things. Di Beichen raised his eyebrows. His voice was hoarse and seductive. We haven't finished what we wanted to do. Hearing Di Beichen's seductive voice, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but recall the scene from before. She immediately glared fiercely at Di Beichen. Be serious. This guy was deliberately saying these words that made her unable to resist. Chapter 1777. My wife, please speak. Your husband is listening. Di Beichen pulled Bailey Hongzhuang's small hand and sat down. He knew that Hongzhuang must have something very serious to tell him. Previously, when Hongzhuang had told him about her time travel, he was still very shocked. However, this did not change anything and he did not take it to heart. He had no idea what kind of person Bailey Hongzhuang was in the past. He had never met her, much less liked her. When he first met Bailey Hongzhuang, she was already his wife's soul. Therefore he had always loved his wife. There was no problem with that. Because of this he naturally did not mind. On the contrary, he felt very fortunate. His wife had traveled through 1,000 years to find him. Beichen, actually, the reason why I had traveled through time was because of a divine weapon. Bailey Hongzhuang stared at Di Beichen's expression. When he heard the two words, divine weapon, Di Beichen's expression changed and was now filled with shock. Divine weapon? Di Beichen's deep eyes were filled with shock. Divine weapons existed only in legends and had heaven-defying abilities. In reality, even though he had heard of divine weapons, he had never seen one before. Come to think of it, even the various sects and clans do not have divine weapons. Yet now, his wife was telling him that she had traveled through time because of a divine weapon? Bailey Hongzhuang gently nodded. I've already dripped my blood on it and that divine weapon has merged into my body. Originally, she had always worn the chaos ring on her finger. However, the chaos ring was far too valuable and she had always been worried that she would lose it. Then one day after she had fallen asleep, the chaos ring had disappeared. At the time she was shocked. Then she realized that the chaos ring had merged with her and existed in her mind. She was relieved. This was without a doubt the best result. This way she wouldn't have to worry about losing the chaos ring. Thinking back to when she first contracted with the chaos ring, she was still a little unaccustomed to all of this. As the time of the contract grew longer and longer, she and the chaos ring became more and more compatible. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's serious expression, Di Beichen knew that Bailey Hongzhuang was telling the truth. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang was thinking about how Di Beichen would react, Di Beichen's face suddenly became serious. His hands tightly grasped Bailey Hongzhuang's hands. "Wife, divine artifacts are treasures that only exist in legends. Since you were able to obtain it, it means that your destiny is extraordinary. You mustn't tell anyone about this. If someone with evil intentions hears about it, you might get yourself killed." Di Beichen's eyes could not hide his nervousness and worry. Any cultivator who possessed a treasure like this would definitely keep their mouths shut and not talk about it. Now, his wife had actually told him about this. It was fine if she told him, but if she told anyone else and this news spread, there would be no peace. An ordinary man is innocent, but treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime. This kind of thing happened quite frequently in the Xingqian continent. Therefore, no one who had obtained a treasure dared to make it public. When Bailey Hongzhuang saw Di Beichen's nervous look, her heart could not help but fill with a thick warmth. She knew that Beichen was someone she could trust. Even a divine weapon as amazing as it was still unable to defeat the love between them. Chapter 1778. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang was not alert at all and was instead smiling very happily, Di Beichen could not help but frown his good-looking eyebrows. "Do you take what I said to heart?" As the young sect master of Tiangang sect, he had seen a lot of the world. Not to mention a divine weapon, even a better weapon would cause a fight. How could he not worry when he saw Hongzhuang's indifferent look? If the news of the divine weapon was spread, he was afraid that he could only take Hongzhuang and flee. After all, for such a treasure, he was afraid that the old fellows of various sects and families would have to come forward. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly hugged Di Beichen. Her face leaned on Di Beichen's chest, and the corners of her lips were filled with a happy and relieved smile. "Beichen, I have never told this news to anyone. I just wanted to tell this news to you." Di Beichen, who was originally worried, stiffened slightly after hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words. In the next second, his eyes became increasingly gentle. Since his wife had not told this news to anyone for so long, it meant that his wife also knew the importance of this divine weapon. However, his wife chose to tell this news to him, which proved that his wife had extraordinary trust in him. This was tantamount to putting her life in his hands. His wife was gambling that the feelings between them were trustworthy. Di Beichen could not help but feel touched. If his wife lost the bet, then she would lose her life. It was enough to see how deep his wife's feelings for him were. He would not let his wife lose. Di Beichen hugged Bailey Hongzhuang with both hands. He only felt that their hearts were closer than before. "Wife, what kind of life did you live before?" Di Beichen looked curiously at Bailey Hongzhuang. He was also curious about his wife's previous life. In the past he thought that he knew Hongzhuang very well. Now he realized that the life he knew before was not the real life of Hongzhuang at all. He wanted to know everything about Hongzhuang. In the past he did not participate in Hongzhuang's life, but he could understand. As for the future, he would always be in Hongzhuang's life. "I used to be the head of the Bailey family." Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Now that there was someone who could listen to her talk about her previous life, she really felt very happy. This kind of thing had always been suppressed in her heart. She did not even have a person to share it with. After a long time, it was inevitable to feel a little depressed. If she told this news to others, they would think that she had gone crazy. Now that the person closest to her had come to listen to her, there was an indescribable satisfaction in her heart. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Di Beichen understood that the Bailey family she was talking about was a real big family. At this moment, Di Beichen finally understood why Hongzhuang had such an intimidating aura. This kind of aura appearing on the younger generation was very shocking. Now that he knew that Hongzhuang was actually the head of an aristocratic family in her previous life, he also understood. As long as one was in power, their aura was far from what ordinary people could compare to. Even if Hongzhuang had transmigrated, her soul was still there, so her aura was still there. "Beichen, is there no longer a Bailey family in the Xingqian continent?" Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but raise her head to look at Di Beichen, her eyes flashing with hope. Chapter 1779. Even if things had changed 1,000 years later and the Bailey family would no longer remember anything about her, she still hoped that the Bailey family could continue to pass on. Di Beichen saw the hope and anticipation in Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes and felt a little sorry for her. He did not want to disappoint Hongzhuang, but he really did not know that the Bailey family existed in the Xingqian continent. Seeing Di Beichen's hesitant and sorry look, Bailey Hongzhuang's heart gradually sank. It seemed that in the course of 1,000 years, the Bailey family had disappeared into the long river of history. Back when she was the head of the Bailey family had been passed on for hundreds of years and its position had always been very stable. Now that she had become Bailey Hongzhuang 1,000 years later, she really hoped that the Bailey family would continue to exist. She did not expect that in the end she would not be able to see the Bailey family again. "Wife, don't be sad." Di Beichen gently stroked Bailey Hongzhuang's back. As the head of the Bailey family in her past life, needless to say, her feelings for the Bailey family must be very deep. Back then she had left the Bailey family because of an accident. Now she naturally hoped that she would have the chance to see them again. Unfortunately, the world was unpredictable. Although the foundation of an aristocratic family was very shocking and the average person could not shake it. However, no one knew what would happen after Sheng recovered. Sometimes, some unexpected situations would occur and some forces would completely disappear. Hearing Di Beichen's consolation, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. She had always had a trace of hope in her heart, but she also knew that the possibility of this was not very high. Back then, when she had suddenly fallen, it must have been a great blow to the Bailey family. At that time, the Bailey family's foundation was very strong and ordinary aristocratic families were no match for them. And because of their strength they had many opponents. The Bailey family had always been eyeing them covetously. If there were any problems they would not miss the opportunity to strike. Obviously, her sudden fall was an opportunity that their opponents could create. Bailey Hongzhuang did not dare to continue thinking. If the disappearance of the Bailey family was really related to her fall, then she would really be a sinner. She didn't want such a thing to happen, but she couldn't help but feel that the possibility of it happening was very high. A feeling of sadness spread in her heart. All this time she had only hoped that she could lead the Bailey family to become stronger and stronger. She had never thought that the Bailey family would one day suffer because of her. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's pale face, Di Beichen understood Bailey Hongzhuang's thoughts and couldn't help but feel distressed. "Wife, none of this has anything to do with you. Don't think too much about it." However, such words obviously did not have much effect on Bailey Hongzhuang. "I'm just a little sad. After all, it's the family that I've lived in for so many years." Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a smile, but that smile did not reach her eyes. The group of old men in the family must have been unable to accept the news of her fall. She knew these old men very well. Usually when they spoke, it was as if they couldn't wait to chase you away, but in fact they were very concerned about her. They just didn't show it because of their pride. Chapter 1780. My dear wife, what's the use of the divine weapon that you've obtained? I've heard that divine weapons have always been extraordinary and their uses far exceed the expectations of ordinary people. Di Beichen's deep and enchanting eyes were filled with astonishment. He had never paid much attention to this kind of existence that only existed in legends. Most of the time he even felt that it didn't exist at all. Now that Hongzhuang was clearly able to help him solve his doubts, he naturally wanted to know more about it. Seeing that Di Beichen had a rare look of confusion, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and explained. The use of the divine weapon is also very astonishing. Before I obtained the Chaos Ring, I had never thought that the divine weapon would have such an incredible use. Back then, after I had dripped my blood on the divine weapon to become its master, the divine weapon's power was simply too astonishing and caused an energy fluctuation. As a result, my physical body had turned into nothingness. If it weren't for the Chaos Ring, I wouldn't have been able to become Bailey Hongzhuang today. Since she had already told Di Beichen about the Chaos Ring, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't hide anything and immediately told Di Beichen everything about the Chaos Ring. The more Di Beichen listened to Bailey Hongzhuang, the more astonished he became. This was simply too astonishing. If it weren't for Hongzhuang's description, he wouldn't have been able to imagine it at all. You mean to say that Xiao He and Xiao Bai were originally the demonic beasts in the Chaos Ring? Di Beichen raised his voice and his handsome face was filled with astonishment. All this time he had never understood what kind of demonic beasts Xiao He and Xiao Bai were. He had understood many demonic beasts and he even had some understanding of the beast kings. However, he really couldn't recognize existences like Xiao He and Xiao Bai. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Yes, ever since I transmigrated, Xiao He and Xiao Bai have been accompanying me. Although the two little fellows were usually gluttons, they were still very concerned about her. Then, does the fact that you can contract 3 contracted beasts have something to do with the Chaos Ring? Di Beichen immediately thought of this possibility. Since Xiao He and Xiao Bai were both demonic beasts from the Chaos Ring, and they had both recognized Bailey Hongzhuang as their master, it was obvious that this had something to do with the Chaos Ring. Yes. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Di Beichen was really smart. She only said part of it, but Di Beichen had already guessed the latter part. So you learned your inscription technique in the Chaos Ring. I was wondering who you learned your inscription technique from. Di Beichen chuckled. He had always been amazed by Hongzhuang's talent in medicine, alchemy, and inscription techniques. However, he had never understood when Hongzhuang had learned them. As early as when he was in Fengbo country, he had already known that Hongzhuang was skilled in medicine and alchemy. However, he had never heard Hongzhuang say that she knew inscription techniques. It hadn't been long since Hongzhuang had left for the Azure Water School and he had gone to find Hongzhuang. After that, he had always been by Hongzhuang's side. However, Hongzhuang had suddenly mastered the inscription technique, and she did not have any master by her side. This was too unbelievable. It wasn't until this moment that he completely understood. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but chuckle. She thought that Beichen must be confused about her past changes. Chapter 1781. I don't know when Yingying will come today, and when Xiren may come to find us at any time, so we can't go to the door of darkness for the time being. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly. She originally planned to go to the door of darkness to cultivate with Di Beichen today, but now it was obviously impossible. It took 3 days to enter the door of darkness, which was equivalent to half a day in the outside world. Di Beichen nodded. I estimate that Yingying will come in the afternoon. Whenever Xiren disappears, Yingying will come directly to the Tiangang sect, and Xiren will be here every time. Then let's cultivate here and wait for Yingying to come. Around evening, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen, who were cultivating, heard a voice coming from above. Beichen, did Xiren come to you again? As the voice fell, the figure was ready to enter the cultivation room. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but find it funny. Shengguan Yingying and Wen Xiren were indeed a match made in heaven, and the way they appeared was exactly the same. It seemed that these two people really knew Di Beichen's palace very well. Di Beichen didn't answer but still sat in the same place, waiting for Shengguan Yingying to come down. Not long after, a woman in a light yellow dress appeared in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. The woman's appearance was dignified and delicate, and her every move revealed the aura of nobility, but the anger between her eyebrows was very obvious, and there was quite a bit of indignation. Don't you know where Xiren usually is? Di Beichen looked at Shengguan Yingying in front of him and smiled faintly. You can go directly to him. When Shengguan Yingying saw Bailey Hongzhuang, her eyes couldn't help but light up, and the anger between her eyebrows instantly dissipated into nothingness, and turned into thick excitement. You are Hongzhuang, right? Although it was a question, what Shengguan Yingying said was a statement. She had known Di Beichen for so many years, but she had never seen Di Beichen so close to any woman. Although Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen were just sitting to the side, her woman's intuition told her that they were very close. In fact, Di Beichen had never brought another woman to the cultivation room. At first, Di Beichen was the only one in the cultivation room. It was only because Xiren was always acting shamelessly that he followed Di Beichen into the cultivation room. She had been with Xiren since she was young, so she was already used to it. Therefore, after Xiren entered the cultivation room, she followed closely behind. Even though Han Shilling had grown up with Di Beichen since she was a child, she had never been inside. Just from this point, she could tell that the woman in front of her was different in Di Beichen's heart. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and nodded. Yingying, it's nice to meet you. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang already knew who she was, Shengguan Yingying's eyes were filled with a touch of surprise. At the same time, she said with a smile, since I knew you, I have always wanted to meet you. I didn't expect to finally meet you today. I'm very happy that you can take in Di Beichen, this evildoer. In the future, Xiren and I don't have to worry about him being alone. When these words came out, Di Beichen's face couldn't help but darken. What did she mean by worrying about him being alone? Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but laugh. It seemed that Xiren and Shengguan Yingying were really worried about his marriage. Chapter 1782. Hearing Di Beichen's words, Shengguan Yingying waved her hand indifferently. Let him do whatever he wants. With that, Shengguan Yingying sat down next to Bailey Hongzhuang, her pretty face filled with joy. Hongzhuang, you don't know, but when you went to participate in the assessment competition, Beichen was extremely nervous. Xiren and I have never seen him like that. Ziren kept lamenting to me that Di Baichen, who had never fallen in love before, had also fallen in love. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but look at Di Baichen. She had always known that Baichen had deep feelings for her. It seemed that Baichen was really worried about her in the 2 years that she wasn't around. Di Baichen glanced at Shengguan Yingying, and then looked at Bailey Hongzhuang next to him with affection. His love for his wife could be witnessed by heaven and earth. Seeing that Di Baichen didn't care about what she had said, Shengguan Yingying's eyes were filled with amazement. Compared to Ziren's shamelessness, Di Baichen was more careful. Now that she had said such things, Di Baichen could still be so calm. It could be seen that the relationship between Di Baichen and Bailey Hongzhuang was not ordinary. Hongzhuang, with you by Baichen's side, Ziren and I are much more relieved. Although it's only the first time we've met, I feel that we will become good friends. Shengguan Yingying's face was filled with a kind smile. She liked Bailey Hongzhuang very much at first sight. Di Baichen's outstanding appearance was well known. In the past, she and Ziren always felt that Di Baichen could not find a match for him. However, now that Hongzhuang was standing next to Di Baichen, they were an unusual match. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were soft, and her smile was sincere and joyful. We will definitely be good friends. She also had a good impression of Shengguan Yingying. This woman gave people a very sincere feeling when they first met. There was a real elegance in her speech. Although all this disappeared when she mentioned Ziren, she liked friends who treated her with sincerity. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang had the same thoughts as her, the smile on Shengguan Yingying's face deepened. Baichen, you've made the right choice this time. The first time I saw Hongzhuang, I felt that you two were a good match. You're not like Han Shiling. I've seen him since he was a child, but I still feel that he's not suitable for you. Shengguan Yingying sighed. Speaking of which, she, Ziren, Di Baichen, and Han Shiling grew up together. However, she had never liked Han Shiling. She just didn't like Han Shiling's pretense of being aloof. He obviously didn't have much ability, but he still acted like he was great. She felt that he was pretentious and not down to earth at all. It was precisely because of this that most of the time Di Baichen, Ziren, and she were often together. Hearing this, Di Baichen glanced at Shengguan Yingying and did not mention Han Shiling. In that case, I have to thank you for taking care of my heart for so many years. Di Baichen raised his eyebrows. Shengguan Yingying was spilling beans about his past. Shengguan Yingying smiled and said proudly, "It's good that you know." Di Baichen's eyes darkened. He always had a feeling that Yingying would lead Hongzhuang astray if she stayed with Hongzhuang for too long. I think I'd better let when Ziren take you away. Chapter 1783. Since he likes to run away from home so much, then let him go. I won't bother with him. Shengguan Yingying snorted coldly. Ziren had always been like this. Every time there was a conflict, he would only run away. This time she also ignored Ziren. She wanted to see what Ziren would do. As she spoke, Shengguan Yingying once again looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a smile and said, "Hongzhuang, I'm afraid I'll be staying in Tiangang sect for this period of time. You won't find me annoying, right?" Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head and said, "Of course not." "That's great." Shengguan Yingying was excited. "Then I'll live with you for this period of time. I can also tell you about Di Baichen's past." Bailey Hongzhuang subconsciously looked at Di Baichen. Speaking of which, she was really curious about Di Baichen's past. "Okay," Bailey Hongzhuang said with a smile. Seeing this, Di Baichen looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with deep meaning. His expression revealed some reluctance. Originally, he and Hongzhuang were enjoying their two-person world. He didn't expect that now Ziren wasn't enough to stir things up. There was also Shengguan Yingying. Looking at this situation, Yingying would probably rely on Hongzhuang for this period of time. Didn't this mean that he wouldn't have a chance during this period of time? This won't do. Di Baichen secretly thought in his heart. He had to quickly make Ziren and Yingying reconcile. Noticing Di Baichen's gaze, Bailey Hongzhuang pretended not to see it. She was very clear about what this big pervert was thinking. Ziren had already heard Shengguan Yingying's movements in the room. The corners of his lips unconsciously rose a little. Every time he left, Yingying would arrive shortly after he arrived at Tiangang sect. Thinking about it, Yingying would come to find him in the room soon. In terms of eloquence, he really couldn't compare to Yingying. He really didn't understand how a woman could be so calculative over such a small matter. However, he had been with Yingying for so many years and had experience in dealing with her. As long as he left, Yingying wouldn't be bothered by it anymore. After all, women were unreasonable when they were angry. If she was given some time to calm down, she would naturally understand. However, Xiren waited in the house for a long time, but Ying did not come to find him. He could not help but frown. This wasn't right. Since Ying was already here, why didn't she come to find him? She must have just met Hong Zhuang. Ying is greeting her. When Xiren pondered. Yes, that must be it. However, as time passed, Shangguan Ying did not appear. When Xiren was dumbfounded. Where did Ying go? Why hasn't she come yet? When Xiren frowned. The situation this time was obviously beyond his expectations. For so many years the way he got along with Ying had not changed. Why did Ying not follow the routine today? As time passed, when Xiren became more and more anxious, and the thoughts in his mind became more and more. Could it be that I'm too wrong this time? Is Ying really angry? If she is really angry, she shouldn't come to Tiangang sect to find me. What the hell is going on? When Xiren kept pacing in the room. The more he couldn't understand, the more anxious he became. If it weren't for his face, he would have gone out to find Shangguan Ying now. Chapter 1784. Hearing the footsteps, when Xiren, who was originally pacing anxiously, quickly sat down in a serious manner as if nothing had happened before. Creak. The door opened and a figure walked into the room. When Xiren's back was facing the door and he didn't turn around. Come on, stop pretending. Ying didn't come. Di Beichen looked at when Xiren's posture and knew that when Xiren was pretending. He directly opened the door and went straight to the point. Hearing Di Beichen's voice, when Xiren couldn't help but turn around. After seeing that there was only Di Beichen and Shangguan Ying's figure behind him, he couldn't help but frown. His expression was filled with doubts. Where's Ying? Your Ying abducted my Hong Zhuang. Di Beichen walked to the opposite side of when Xiren and sat down. His beautiful face was filled with helplessness. When Xiren was dumbfounded. What's going on? Your Ying has already decided to stay in Tiangang sect and be good sisters with Hong Zhuang. Hong Zhuang said that it doesn't matter how long she wants to stay. In my opinion, you'd better coax Ying quickly. Di Beichen was very sad. It was fine that Xiren and Ying had a conflict, but who would have thought that Ying would actually occupy Hong Zhuang? In desperation, he could only team up with Xiren. When Xiren, who was originally very helpless, couldn't help but laugh after seeing Di Beichen's appearance. Aha, Di Beichen, it seems that you really like Hong Zhuang. In the past, everyone thought that you weren't interested in women. I think you've put all your interest in Hong Zhuang. When Xiren laughed loudly, in the past you couldn't stand me being with Ying. Now it's my turn to be unable to stand you. He clearly remembered that when he and Ying were together in the past, Di Beichen couldn't stand them. He didn't expect that now that Ying had just snatched Hong Zhuang for a while, Di Beichen had already urged him to reconcile with Ying. However, Di Beichen didn't take Xiren's ridicule to heart. At that time I was a single man. Now I have a wife. Of course it's different. Looking at Di Beichen's unperturbed expression, when Xiren also felt a burst of admiration. To be able to say such things with such a serious appearance, she was afraid that besides Di Beichen, there was no other person who could do it. Then what should we do now? When Xiren frowned. If Ying really lived with Hong Zhuang in Tiangang sect, then the person who was troubled should be him. Who asked you to run away every time something happens? Now that your wife has run away, you can only chase after her. Di Beichen shrugged indifferently. He had never interfered in the matters between Xiren and Ying. Because, with the degree of rebuke between these two people once they reconciled, then the person who was in the wrong would be him. He, Di Beichen, wouldn't do such a thankless thing. You're too unloyal. When Xiren was speechless, in any case we're brothers. For other things you can ask me for help. But for this kind of thing it's better for you to solve it yourself. Di Beichen shook his head. He also had no experience in dealing with this kind of thing. Fortunately, Hong Zhuang had always had an excellent character. From the time they got along until now, they had been apart more than together. Naturally, it was impossible for them to have a dispute. Chapter 1785. At dinner time. Bailey Hong Zhuang and Shangguan Ying had dinner together. Shangguan Ying was extremely enthusiastic. She was like an old friend to Bailey Hong Zhuang at first sight. She pulled Bailey Hong Zhuang and said a lot of things to her. However, Bailey Hong Zhuang could feel that Ying was still thinking about Xiren. From that subtle expression, it could be judged that she always looked outside the house from time to time. Although the movements were very small, they were still seen by Bailey Hong Zhuang. Bailey Hong Zhuang also looked outside the house. She didn't know if Beichen would come over with Xiren at dinner time. She naturally hoped that the unpleasantness between Yingying and Xiren could be resolved as soon as possible. In this way Yingying could be happier. Since Yingying came, Yingying had been talking about various things when she was young with Xiren and Di Beichen. Although Yingying mainly talked about Beichen to her, she couldn't help but talk about Xiren. Just from this expression, Bailey Hongzhuang could understand Yingying's feelings for Xiren. However, Beichen didn't come with Xiren until now. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but frown. She didn't ask Yingying why she was unhappy with Xiren this time. However, since Yingying had already come to Tianggang sect, Xiren should also come to see her. A moment later, 2 footsteps sounded outside the house. Hearing this sound, Shengguan Yingying's eyes changed a little, but she forced herself not to look outside the house. When Xiren walked into the house behind Di Beichen. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang, Di Beichen smiled gently and sat down beside Bailey Hongzhuang. When Xiren glanced at Di Beichen, then unnaturally sat down beside Shengguan Yingying. Looking at this scene, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but find it a little funny. She couldn't tell that Xiren's sunny and confident appearance from before would have such an expression when facing Yingying. Shengguan Yingying also knew that Xiren was beside her, but she didn't say anything. She only minded her own business and ate her own food. The atmosphere suddenly became awkward. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Shengguan Yingying and then at Wen Xiren. Neither of them spoke. Di Beichen held Bailey Hongzhuang's little hand under the table and said with a smile, "Don't worry about them. It'll be fine in a while." Bailey Hongzhuang didn't know how Di Beichen came to this conclusion, but she always believed in Di Beichen's words. Under Di Beichen's signal, Bailey Hongzhuang quickly finished her meal and then walked out of the house with Di Beichen. Shengguan Hongzhuang couldn't help but want to say something when she saw that Bailey Hongzhuang was about to leave. However, she still didn't say anything after Di Beichen held Bailey Hongzhuang's hand and left. Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang returned to their own house together. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a faint smile. As long as Yingying and Xiren met, the problem would be solved soon. "You called Xiren over?" Bailey Hongzhuang asked with a smile. "He didn't deal with the trouble he caused himself. Could it be that he wants my wife to help him deal with it?" Di Beichen said. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly. "Yingying is a very good person. I heard a lot about you from Yingying today." Di Beichen raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "It's good to know. It's also good to let you know how loyal your husband is to you." Seeing Di Beichen's solemn expression, Shengguan Yingying was slightly stunned, but then she smiled. "It's good that you know." Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Di Beichen in front of her, and the corners of her mouth unconsciously rose. Beichen had always been able to give her an indescribable sense of security. Di Beichen put one hand on Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder. "You don't have to worry about me and Hongzhuang. It's good that you don't have to have any conflicts." Chapter 1787. When Xiren, who was still gloating, was dumbfounded when he saw Shengguan Yingying suddenly turn the spearhead to him. How did the problem shift to him? Di Beichen looked at Wen Xiren with a smile. Who asked this guy to be so proud now? Now he couldn't be proud anymore. "Wife, I'm also very good to you." Wen Xiren's face was full of smiles. He finally reconciled with Yingying and he didn't want to have another conflict later. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen's faces were full of smiles. From Di Beichen's mouth, Bailey Hongzhuang learned that Dr. Feng, who helped Di Beichen treat his leg disease, was found by Wen Xiren. When Di Beichen was in Feng Bo country, Xiren and Shengguan Yingying were still very concerned about him. They cherished the friendship they had built up since they were young. When Xiren and Shengguan Yingying stayed in Tianggang sect for a few days before leaving. The two also had a lot of things to deal with in the sect, so they couldn't stay out for too long. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. Today was the day when the new disciples came to report. Bailey Hongzhuang left the cultivation state early, waiting for the arrival of Jiqing and the others. These days, she, Beichen and the 3 beasts often cultivated in the Door of Darkness. Di Beichen was obviously very interested in the world in the Door of Darkness. With Di Beichen by Bailey Hongzhuang's side, she was also a lot safer in the desert world. With less threat to her life, she could also deal with the monsters wholeheartedly. As long as Bailey Hongzhuang didn't ask for help, Di Beichen wouldn't help. After all, Hongzhuang also needed the opportunity to improve her strength. The three beasts were also diligently cultivating here. Xiao He and Xiao Bai transformed into huge figures under Di Beichen's astonished gaze. White Lion's body was also constantly growing. This was the most suitable place for him to cultivate. Every time after a big battle, White Lion would eat demon crystals and replenish itself quickly. Wife, Gong Xiaoqing and the others should have already arrived at the mountain gate. Let's go take a look. You'll be cultivating with them today, Di Beichen said slowly. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. Okay, let's go take a look. On such an important day, Gong Xiaoqing and the others would not be late. Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang walked together to the gate of Tiangang's sect. From today onwards, Bailey Hongzhuang chose to cultivate in one of the 4 halls. Today was the day that the new disciples came to report. The disciples of Tiangang sect all knew and many people were paying close attention. Although they already knew that Bailey Hongzhuang won first place in the assessment competition, they were still curious about which dynasty the other cultivators were from. When Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang appeared in front of everyone, everyone's eyes were filled with amazement. They knew that Bailey Hongzhuang was staying in the young sect master's bedroom during this period. Moreover, the sect master obviously had no objections to Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen being together. In their opinion, it wouldn't be long before the young sect master and Bailey Hongzhuang got married. In this way, Bailey Hongzhuang's identity would be completely different in the future. It seems that the relationship between the young sect master and Bailey Hongzhuang is really good. The young sect master really likes Bailey Hongzhuang. This Bailey Hongzhuang is really lucky. Chapter 1788. The cultivators of Tiangang sect no longer disliked Bailey Hongzhuang as before because after the assessment competition, Bailey Hongzhuang had already proven her strength. Now, everyone could only sigh with emotion at Bailey Hongzhuang's good luck to be able to meet the young sect master when he was at his lowest point. She was really lucky. In fact, many people also understood that Bailey Hongzhuang was not trying to climb up the social ladder. This was because when the young sect master left Tiangang sect, he had already become a cripple. Even the disciples who were cultivating in Tiangang sect at that time felt that the young sect master would never be able to stand up again after seeing him in that state. Therefore at that time, other than lamenting, they did not have any thoughts of getting close to the young sect master. Therefore it was not strange for the young sect master to fall in love with Bailey Hongzhuang. The feeling of providing charcoal in snowy weather was often extremely precious. Some male cultivators understood this very well. The woman who climbed up the social ladder when they were successful could not be compared to the woman who accompanied them when they were suffering. It was because they understood this feeling that many male cultivators respected Bailey Hongzhuang. To be able to be together with Di Beichen under such circumstances, this kind of woman was worthy of admiration. Bailey Hongzhuang listened to the discussions of the surrounding cultivators and could not help but find it funny. It seemed that in many people's eyes she was the one with extremely good luck. Young sect master Miss Bailey? A gray figure appeared beside Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen and bowed to them with a modest smile on his face. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but turn around to look at the person. She had met this elder before but she did not know him very well. Di Beichen lowered his head to see Bailey Hongzhuang's astonished look and immediately explained. It should have been the great elder who came to welcome the new disciple, but the great elder is still in confinement, so the second elder was sent. Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly understood. She had not seen the great elder since he was punished. She understood that whether it was her grandfather or Beichen, they were slowly dispersing the power in the great elder's hands. Since she recognized her grandfather, he had doted on her very much, and she also understood that her grandfather was a very protective person. Since the great elder was a threat to her, her grandfather naturally would not let such a threat continue to exist. Perhaps the great elder would not come out for a while. Even if he came out, the situation would be completely different from before. However, this was a good thing for her. Originally, she was still a little worried that after she came to Tiangang sect to cultivate, the first elder would obstruct her. Now that the first elder was punished and confined, she was also free of this trouble. Second elder. Bailey Hongzhuang bowed to the second elder, Xiaoingzi. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang bowing to him, Xiaoingzi was slightly stunned and somewhat flattered. Everyone knew that Bailey Hongzhuang was the future wife of the young sect master and her status was very noble. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and the young sect master had not yet married, so as the elders of the sect, they were very conflicted about how to treat Bailey Hongzhuang. At this moment, seeing Bailey Hongzhuang bowing to him, he could not help but be a little surprised. This? Chapter 1789. Di Beichen nodded to Qiaoingzi and said, Hongzhuang is now a new disciple of Tiangang's sect. Second elder should treat her as you should. You don't have to care about anything else. Hongzhuang had already told him about this matter before. Since she was a cultivator who had passed the assessment competition and joined Tiangang's sect, she naturally did not want to get too many privileges in this regard. She should cultivate well. After all, they had not married yet. Listening to Di Beichen's words, Qiaoingzi responded, yes. Qiaoingzi, who was still worried about how to deal with this matter, was relieved after hearing Di Beichen's words. At least he didn't have to worry about whether he should salute Bailey Hongzhuang or Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly. At present, she was just an ordinary disciple of Tiangang's sect. After cultivating here for 3 months, she would go to Wuji Palace to learn from her master. If she was treated too special here, it would cause inconvenience to the elders. Second elder, are you going to pick up the new disciples now? Di Beichen asked aloud. Qiaoingzi nodded and said, yes, it's almost time now. I think they have already arrived. Then let's go down together. Di Beichen looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. He thought that Hongzhuang had not seen Xia Jiqing and the others for such a long time. She should miss them very much. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were tinged with joy. When Jiqing and the others returned to their respective homes, they must be very happy. Now that they could cultivate together in Tiangang's sect, this was undoubtedly a very happy thing. Yes. Qiaoingzi responded and then followed Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang to the bottom of Tiangang's sect. He was different from the great elder. He was originally on the side of the young sect master. Now that the sect master had returned, Tiangang's sect had the sect master in charge, and the sect master had given all the rights to the young sect master. At this time, the best way was to listen to the arrangements of the young sect master. Those who had previously been hostile to the young sect master did not have a good ending. He would never make such a mistake. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen went all the way down the mountain and soon arrived at the gate. Gong Shaoqing, Xia Jiqing and the others had already arrived outside. With the appearance of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, Xia's and the others' faces all showed smiles. Boss, you are here. After not seeing Bailey Hongzhuang for more than 2 months, Xia Jiqing only felt a burst of joy when she saw her. Ever since she met Boss, apart from when Boss went to the Bloodground Abyss, she had always been with Boss. This time she had been missed to sect, miss master. She had long known that the sect master must have come to Tiangang's sect with Di Beichen early. Now that she saw the sect master coming to pick them up, she felt very happy. Bailey Hongzhuang's face was also filled with a happy smile. You are here. Gong Shaoqing and the others smiled and nodded. Compared to the unreachable feeling when they first came to Tiangang's sect, there was only excitement in their hearts now. I haven't seen you for a while, everyone's face is a lot rosier. Chapter 1790. Listening to Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Dongfang Yu and the others all laughed. With the results they achieved in the assessment competition, it was natural for them to be praised when they returned to their respective dynasties. The people in their families were also very good to them. Under the glorious eyes of everyone, they only felt that the hardships they suffered in the assessment competition were nothing at all. For the final result, everything was worth it. They seemed to have become heroes the moment they returned. Everyone praised them and many young cultivators regarded them as idols. Such a scene was beyond their expectations. In the past, they had never thought that they would one day achieve such good results. Under such circumstances, they were naturally in a good mood, and their faces immediately became rosy. Boss, you don't know, after I went back this time, the people in the family praised me to the sky. Xia Jiqing's face could not hide the excitement. She had never enjoyed such treatment in the family before. Although her cultivation talent was not bad because her personality was too straightforward, there were not many people in the family who liked her. However, after going back this time, her situation had completely changed. Do you still remember Tong Xingyi? Xia Jiqing asked aloud. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang thought for a while and immediately nodded. Thinking back, it was because Tong Xingyi kept finding trouble with her that she met Jiqing. However, after Tong Xingyi learned that she was a student of the special enrollment class, she did not provoke her. Gradually, she didn't take Tong Xingyi to heart. The Tong family is not far from our Xia family. I have had conflicts with Tong Xingyi since I was a child. When I went back, Tong Xingyi was also at home. After she knew my results, she was furious, haha. When she thought of Tong Xingyi's sullen, excited and incredulous expression, she felt a burst of joy. In the past, Tong Xingyi always liked to be arrogant in front of her, but now she could only tuck her tail in front of her. Looking at Xia Jiqing's happy appearance, Bailey Hongzhuang's smile widened. As early as the first time they met, she knew that there was a grudge between Jiqing and Tong Xingyi. Now that she could hold her head high, it was indeed a happy thing. At this moment, Yuan Xiaoman also walked to Bailey Hongzhuang's side, her delicate face filled with a joyful smile. Boss, Li Qing was so excited when she found out that you and I were on the same team. When Yuan Xiaoman returned to the Snow Origin country, her and Yuan Jixian's results in the assessment had already been made known to everyone. Therefore, when they returned to the clan, everyone in the clan was already there to welcome them. When Yuan Hongyang and Yuan Liqing found out that it was because of their boss that they were able to achieve such results in the competition, they were extremely shocked. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. How is Liqing doing now? She's doing very well, she just hopes to see you again one day, Yuan Xiaoman said with a smile. Yuan Jixin also walked up at this moment, his handsome face relaxed and happy. Boss, Hongyang asked me to thank you on behalf of the entire Yuan family. If it weren't for you, the Yuan family situation wouldn't be as good as it is now. Chapter 1791. Back then, when the big boss and the young sect master had gone to Origin Martial City, they had helped the Yuan family. Otherwise, the Yuan family would have fallen into trouble. After that, he and Xiaoman had met the big boss and had been helped by the big boss. This news had exceeded the expectations of everyone in the Yuan family. In the history of the Snow Origin dynasty, there has never been such a good result. Therefore, their names have now spread throughout the entire Snow Origin country. Even though he had a dream of becoming a hero since he was young, he had never thought that he would actually be able to achieve it. Now he was a hero that everyone in the Snow Origin country knew about. The entire Yuan family was proud of him and Xiaoman. All of this was because of the big boss. If it had not been for the big boss, forget about becoming a hero, they would have become corpses in the great examination. Therefore, Yuan Jixin's gratitude towards Bailey Hongzhuang could no longer be expressed in words. He had already secretly vowed that he would go through water and tread on fire for the big boss in the future. If it had not been for the big boss, they would have lost everything by now. Therefore, their lives belonged to the big boss. It was not only Yuan Jixin, Yuan Xiaoman also had the same thought. In the future, anyone who tried to harm the big boss would be their enemy. If they wanted to harm the big boss, they would have to step over their bodies. Bailey Hongzhuang was unaware of Yuan Jixin and Yuan Xiaoman's thoughts. After hearing Yuan Hongzhuang's gratitude towards her, she could not help but smile. Unknowingly, so much time had passed since they had been in the blood-ground abyss. If she had the chance, she would really like to go back with Beichen and have a look. You don't have to be so polite, we're all friends. Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was light and pleasant to the ear. When she thought about how they had left the Tiangang sect 2 years ago without knowing the future and how they had all become disciples of the Tiangang sect, her heart was filled with joy. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang, who didn't feel like she had done anything great, Yuan Jixin and Yuan Xiaoman looked at each other and smiled. Their big boss was like that. She had clearly done something that they were deeply grateful towards, yet she felt that it was nothing. However, it was this kind of big boss that they were willing to give up everything for. This was boss's charm. Di Beichen glanced at the cultivators present. Apart from Bailey Hongzhuang, there were a total of 10 people present. Since everyone is here, let's go in. Di Beichen's voice was gentle and dignified. In front of Hongzhuang he was always gentle, but in front of other practitioners, he had to show the dignity of a young sect leader. As Bailey Hongzhuang's words fell, Xia Jiqing and the others were stunned. From today onwards, they were disciples of Tiangang sect. This day was of great significance to them. Although Di Beichen had always been a friend in his eyes, this was Tiangang sect, and Di Beichen was their young sect master. Therefore their attitude could not be as casual as before. At least, in front of others. Bailey Hongzhuang quietly walked into the team. From today on, she was also a new disciple of Tiangang sect. Everything needed to be done well. Chapter 1792. The next moment, Di Beichen directly took Bailey Hongzhuang's hand and pulled her out of the team, and immediately walked towards the top of Tiangang sect. Looking at Di Beichen's actions, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but be stunned and whispered, "Beichen? Now the entire Tiangang sect already knows that you are my wife. It is too late for you to pretend now. Di Beichen's tone was overbearing and gentle. He promised Hong Zhuang that he would treat her like an ordinary cultivator when he was cultivating. However, he did not promise to hide their identity. Therefore, Hong Zhuang was indeed an ordinary disciple of Tiangang sect, but she was also Di Beichen's wife. Bailey Hong Zhuang was slightly stunned. Didn't Di Beichen promise her before that he would treat her like an ordinary disciple? In addition to the time of cultivation, you are my wife on weekdays. Di Beichen said again. When his voice fell, Di Beichen no longer said anything and just walked with Hong Zhuang. After seeing Di Beichen's overbearing appearance, Xia Jiqing and others showed a smile on their faces. Di Beichen is really good to the boss. Now the entire Tiangang sect already knows that the boss is Di Beichen's wife. Xia Jiqing's eyes were filled with joy. Seeing that the relationship between the boss and Di Beichen was so good, she was really happy for the boss. I don't know when the young sect master and the boss will get married? Yuan Xiaoman raised an eyebrow. With the relationship between the young sect master and the boss so good, it should be a matter of course to get married. It should be soon. In fact, the boss and the young sect master have already been married before, but the identity of the young sect master at that time is different from the current one, so the previous one doesn't seem to count. After hearing Yuan Xiaoman's address to Di Beichen, Xia Jiqing also changed the address. If she directly called Di Beichen's name in Tiangang sect, it seemed to be too disrespectful to the young sect master. Hearing this, Yuan Xiaoman suddenly understood. When the young sect master and the boss went to the Yuan family together, they all thought that the boss and the young sect master were newlyweds. She didn't know much about the boss's previous affairs, but as long as she knew that good things were coming, it was enough. I don't know if the sect master is as satisfied with the boss, and the great elder knows that Han Xiling is dead. He will definitely not give up. Yuan Xiaoman was a little worried, but judging from the situation when the boss came to pick them up, things shouldn't be as bad as she thought. Xia Jiqing's eyes also sank. She had long known that the great elder was unscrupulous. She was afraid that the boss would inevitably encounter trouble after coming to Tiangang sect. However, Xia Jiqing's sect master's eyes is. With the young sect master's love for the boss, he should not let the great elder bully the boss. Although Gong Shaoqing and the others did not speak, they were also worried about the situation of Bailey Hongzhuang. They all knew in their hearts that if it were not for Bailey Hongzhuang, they would still be passers-by. Gong Shaoqing and Dong Fangyu remembered the time when they first met Bailey Hongzhuang, and now they only felt that all the changes were really not small. In fact, when they saw Hongzhuang for the first time, they had a feeling that she was different from the rest. Hongzhuang was born to be the kind of woman who attracted the attention of everyone. As long as she appeared, people would unconsciously be attracted to her. Chapter 1793. Behind Xia Jiqing and the others, Pan Zimo and Dong Hongyun couldn't help but look at each other. After seeing that Di Beichen was so good to Bailey Hongzhuang, their hearts were full of shock. Although they already knew the identity of Bailey Hongzhuang, now that they saw how much Di Beichen doted on Bailey Hongzhuang, they couldn't help but be speechless. As early as the end of the assessment, Di Beichen personally went to pick up Bailey Hongzhuang. This scene made everyone surprised. In the past they were also proud, but in front of Bailey Hongzhuang and the young sect master, they didn't have the capital to be proud. Dong Hongyun couldn't help but rejoice. After knowing the identity of Bailey Hongzhuang, he apologized in time and was forgiven by Bailey Hongzhuang. If that was the case, the only path left for him was death. Thinking that Han Xiling died in the hands of Bailey Hongzhuang, but the young sect master was still so good to Bailey Hongzhuang. Just this point, it could be seen that Bailey Hongzhuang's extraordinary status. Fortunately, Bailey Hongzhuang was not a vengeful person. Now he was also full of gratitude to Bailey Hongzhuang. Under the circumstances at that time, if Bailey Hongzhuang was not willing to forgive him, this was also very normal. Pan Zimo's mood was also very good. Before participating in the assessment, he was looking forward to the day when he could enter Tiangang's sect. Now this dream had really come true. Thinking of the various things he had in the dynasty a few days ago, he really felt that his hard work for such a long time was worth it. He also felt fortunate that he met Mo Yunjue and the others at that time. Otherwise he was afraid that he might not have such a good result now. Cheng Hufeng and Yu Junfei were both disciples of Tiangang's sect. Cheng Hufeng was in the top 10. At that time when he was choosing a sect, he chose Tiangang's sect. Speaking of which, all of this was really a coincidence. Except for Shirt Sairong, The four of them had interacted with Bailey Hongzhuang before. As early as at the end of the assessment, when he saw the scene of Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang hugging each other, Qing Hufeng felt lucky that he didn't fall out with Bailey Hongzhuang at that time. Otherwise, in that case he could only go to other sections. After all, if he offended the young sect master's wife, how could he have a good result if he stayed in the sect to cultivate? Originally, he didn't understand how Bailey Hongzhuang could become a sealing master with her strength. Now that he knew the identity of Bailey Hongzhuang, he completely understood. With Bailey Hongzhuang's identity, it wasn't strange for her to become a sealing master. Some of the geniuses in sects couldn't be judged by common sense. Even if they were of the same age, the cultivators in sects were usually much stronger than them. Yu Junfei didn't know what to say. He only felt that Fang Wenqing was right to die. If he didn't die in the hands of Bailey Hongzhuang, he would have died in the hands of the young sect master after the assessment. At this moment he finally understood. Bailey Hongzhuang didn't participate in the assessment as a small empire's team. They were clearly the same team as Han Shiling's team. They were only separated into two teams because of the conflict between the two parties. Probably many people didn't understand this point. It was because everyone didn't know that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others pretended to be pigs to eat tigers all the way until the end. They were simply too shrewd. Chapter 1794. Not long after, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others arrived at Tiangang Zone. Xia Jiqing and the others had already been to Tiangang Zone and were no stranger to the situation here. Qing Hufeng and the others were obviously coming to Tiangang Zone for the first time, so they were full of curiosity and shock for everything in front of them. They had long heard of the vastness and extraordinariness of the sect, but imagination was always imagination. Only when they saw it with their own eyes would they know what a magnificent scene it was. Look, Bailey Hongzhuang's group of friends really became cultivators of our Tiangang Zone. They are also very powerful. None of them were injured and all of them came back safely. Not only that, their rankings are very good. You really can't judge a book by its cover. The cultivators of Tiangang Zone looked at Xia Jiqing and the others. 2 years ago they only thought that after Xia Jiqing and the others left, they would never come back alive. After all, they all understood the cruelty of the assessment competition. If they were not strong enough, they would only have a dead end if they participated. They were not optimistic about the strength of the Kanglan College's group of cultivators because the gap was too big. However, now that they saw them return safely, although everyone felt that it was a little difficult to accept, they still respected them a little more in their hearts. At least, compared to the time when they were completely relying on Bailey Hongzhuang's relationship to come here, now they had proven that they did have the strength. For many cultivators, what they most disliked was to rely on relationships to get the status they had worked so hard for so long before. Because this would make them have a strong sense of imbalance in their hearts. But if the other party also had the same strength, then they would not be so repulsed as before. The remarks of the surrounding cultivators were not missed by Xia Jiqing and the others. Compared to the remarks 2 years ago, the words they heard at the moment were undoubtedly more pleasing to the ears. Thinking of this, everyone smiled at each other. Sure enough, standing here with their own strength had a completely different experience. Now these guys don't dare to laugh at us anymore. Xia Jiqing's face was filled with a proud smile. When they first listened to the slander of other cultivators, they also had a breath of resentment in their hearts. Fortunately, now all of this had been solved. Dongfang Yu's peach blossom eyes curved into a charming arc. Why bother with what others say? Just be yourself. At this time, Di Beichen looked at Xiaoingzi and said, "Second elder, I'll have to trouble you to take them to the conference hall. The 4 hall masters should already be waiting." Hearing this, Xiaoingzi respectfully bowed. "Yes, then I will take them to the conference hall now." Di Beichen glanced at Bailey Hongzhuang with a smile. "You can choose the branch palace that you want to cultivate. I will not accompany you there." Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly and smiled sweetly. "I understand." Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's bright smile, Di Beichen's eyes lit up. Even though he had been with Hongzhuang for such a long time, every time she smiled, he would be stunned. He thought that he had been poisoned by a poison called Hongzhuang. However, he was willing to endure it. "Now everyone follow me to the conference hall." After leaving a sentence, Xiaoingzi walked in the direction of the conference hall. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also followed behind Xiaoingzi. Chapter 1795. After Di Beichen left, Xia Jiqing went to Bailey Hongzhuang's side. However, because the second elder was in front and they were about to go to the conference hall, she did not dare to pull Hongzhuang to say anything else. After the report was completed, she could have a good chat with her boss about what had happened during this period of time. Gong Xiaoqing and the others followed closely behind Bailey Hongzhuang, while Cheng Hufeng's group of 4 walked at the back. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang had such a good relationship with the cultivators in her team, they couldn't help but feel sad. The cultivators in her team were a group of extremely lucky guys. Under the leadership of the second elder, after walking for a while, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also arrived at the conference hall. Xiao Yingzi knocked on the door of the conference hall. After hearing the sound coming from the door, he pushed open the door of the conference hall and walked in with the new disciples. In their line of sight, they saw the 4 palace masters sitting on the seats on both sides. With the appearance of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, the eyes of the 4 palace masters fell on them. Feeling the eyes of the palace masters, Xia Jiqing and the others all held their breath and showed a serious look on their faces. The eyes of the 4 palace masters looked at everyone. This time, Tiangang sect had recruited 12 cultivators in the top 100 of the assessment competition. This number was already very good. After all, the strength of the top 10 sects was not weak. Most of the time each sect had 10 people. This time, the young sect master personally came out and the effect was really different. The second elder's voice sounded. The work of the great elder had now fallen on her. Tiangang sect is divided into 4 halls, namely Azure Dragon Hall, White Tiger Hall, Vermilion Bird Hall and Black Tortoise Hall. This is the Azure Dragon Hall Master Yan Kaicheng. This is the White Tiger Hall Master Qi Han. This is the Vermilion Bird Hall Master Qin Ai. This is the Black Tortoise Hall Master Gu Jingqing. The second elder introduced the identities of the 4 palace masters to the new disciples. All the disciples of Tiangang sect would cultivate in these 4 halls. The strength of the 4 halls was similar and there was competition. In Tiangang sect, there would be a competition between the 4 halls every once in a while. With competition there was motivation. This was also implemented in the sect. This was because once there was no competition, the cultivator would naturally not feel nervous and would gradually become lazy. Listening to the second elder's introduction, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, one after another, they bowed and said, "Greetings to the 4 palace masters." Today, Bailey Hongzhuang was a lot more indifferent when facing the 4 palace lords. When she first met the 4 palace lords, she was still very worried. But now, this feeling had obviously disappeared. The Azure Dragon Hall Master Xiao Hongzhen and the White Tiger Hall Master Jianghu had already disappeared from the Tiangang sect. As for how the sovereign dealt with them, Bailey Hongzhuang did not ask. However, she only needed to know that their ending would definitely not be good. Yan Kaicheng and Qi Han were the 2 palace masters chosen by the sect master. The strength and influence of these 2 people were very clear. Of course, these 2 people were completely on the sect master and young sect master's side and did not have any disloyalty. Chapter 1796. The 4 palace masters were just sitting there, but everyone could feel a heavy pressure. That was the aura that belonged to a superior person. The momentum that was cultivated by being in a high position for many years was something that ordinary people could not possess. Therefore, when facing the 4 palace masters, they could not help but feel weak. There was a faint smile on the faces of the 4 palace masters. It just so happened that there were 12 disciples. Each of the 4 palace masters would get 3, so it was more fair. You have a total of 12 disciples here. Every 3 people will enter a palace. You can choose by yourselves. Once you have chosen, stand in front of us. Qin Ai's face was filled with a kind smile, and his voice was gentle and majestic. The cultivation of the top 100 in the assessment competition was very good. They were all good seedlings that could be cultivated well in each palace. Because the number of new disciples was relatively small, they still had to compete with each other. The current situation where the number of people could be divided equally was undoubtedly what they hoped for the most. After all, they were still hall masters. It would be unsightly for them to fight over outstanding seedlings to the point where their faces were flushed red. Even though they were often like this in private. As Qin Ai's voice fell, Xia Jiqing and the others looked at each other. Obviously, this situation was somewhat beyond their expectations. You can discuss it. If you have a good relationship, you can enter a palace. Don't be too nervous. Yan Kaicheng smiled indifferently. The rankings of the cultivators in this assessment competition were very high. Therefore, they were not worried about who would join their palace. Xia Jiqing walked to Bailey Hongzhuang's side and said, Boss, I will go to whichever palace you go to. In Xia Jiqing's heart, this kind of problem did not need her to consider at all. No matter which palace boss went to, she would follow. From the past to the present, she had never intended to be separated from boss. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly. She knew that Jiqing would definitely be with her. As for which palace she would go to, she had also thought about it. She chose the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Not only her, but her grandfather and Di Beichen were also very much in agreement. Among the 4 palace masters, only Qin Ai and Gu Jingqing knew that she was her grandfather's granddaughter. The other 2 palace masters did not know. It wasn't that Si Tuyin didn't trust Yan Kaiqing and Qi Yinghan, but the fewer people who knew about this, the better. Once more people knew about it, the possibility of the news being leaked would increase. Moreover, she would be going to Limitless Palace to cultivate 3 months later. If he were to cultivate under other palace masters, it would undoubtedly be extremely inconvenient. However, in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, this was clearly not a problem. After hearing Xia Jiqing's words, Bai Junyu also walked to Xia Jiqing's side and said, Hongzhuang Jiqing, I am in the same hall as you. Xia Jiqing subconsciously glanced at Bai Junyu. When she heard that Bai Junyu was going to cultivate in the same hall as her, she couldn't help but feel a little happy. At the very least, Bai Junyu did not choose to cultivate in the same place as Yuan Xiaoman, but chose to cultivate in the same place as her. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled at Bai Junyu. It seemed that Bai Junyu's feelings for Jiqing had not changed at all. After they cultivated together in the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, it was time to break through this layer of window paper. Although this matter would make Xiaoman sad, Bailey Hongzhuang believed that Xiaoman would definitely find the happiness that truly belonged to her. Chapter 1797. When Yuan Xiaoman saw that Bai Junyu had chosen to cultivate in the same hall as Xia Jiqing, her eyes were filled with sadness. Did this mean that Xia Jiqing was always the one who occupied the most weight in Bai Junyu's heart? She and Jiqing were good friends and she never had the idea of competing with Jiqing for a sweetheart. All the choices were Bai Junyu's. If Bai Junyu chose her, she would be happy. But if Bai Junyu chose Xia Jiqing, she would also give her blessings. No matter what, they were great friends. Yuan Jixin also noticed the change in Yuan Xiaoman's expression. He knew about Xiaoman's feelings for Bai Junyu. Although Yuan Xiaoman was usually carefree as if she didn't care about anything, he and Xiaoman grew up together, so he knew that this was the first time Xiaoman liked someone. Thinking about it, the first time you liked someone but was rejected, this feeling must be very uncomfortable. As Xiaoman's brother, he could only comfort her. Yuan Jixin patted Yuan Xiaoman's shoulder, only hoping that she wouldn't be too sad because of this. At least, her brother had always been by her side. Feeling Yuan Jixin's care, Yuan Xiaoman pulled a smile on her face and shook her head at Yuan Jixin, indicating that she was fine. Because Yuan Jixin and Yuan Xiaoman would definitely cultivate together, and Gong Shaoqing and Dong Fangyu, who had been good brothers for so many years, would naturally not be separated. Therefore the grouping was quickly determined. Bailey Hongzhuang, Xia Jiqing, and Bai Junyu stood in front of Qin Ai together. Qin Ai smiled slightly. He had already known that Bailey Hongzhuang would come to his team. Not to mention Bailey Hongzhuang's identity as the granddaughter of the sovereign, just the first place of the assessment, Bailey Hongzhuang came to the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall, he would definitely train her well. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 2 bowed to Qin Ai. In the future they would follow Hall Master Qin. Gong Shaoqing, Dong Fangyu and Pan Zimo stood in front of Yan Kaiqing. They chose the Azure Dragon Palace Hall. It just so happened that the 3 men were very suitable to cultivate in the Azure Dragon Palace Hall. Yuan Jixin, Yuan Xiaoman and Dong Hongyun chose White Tiger Hall. Compared to Qing Hufeng and the others, they were more familiar with Dong Hongyun. Although they once had a conflict with Dong Hongyun, all the conflicts had vanished into thin air. Moreover, Dong Hongyun had helped them in the past, so they had a good impression of Dong Hongyun. Qing Hufeng, Yu Junfei, and Shirt Sairong remained in the Black Tortoise Hall. The 4 hall masters nodded their heads in satisfaction when they saw that everyone had quickly chosen their respective sub-halls. Today is everyone's first day of reporting. After confirming your respective training halls, there won't be any problems. Later, when you go to your respective branch halls, the elders will tell you where you will live in the future. Cultivate well in the branch halls, Yan Kaiqing said slowly. Yes. Bailey Hongzhuang replied. Although you have defeated many opponents to become a member of Tiangang's sect, don't think that you can relax after coming here. Here your cultivation life has just begun. If you don't cultivate well and improve, then you will also be eliminated by Tiangang sect. The results you obtained in the assessment competition are indeed very good, but here, there are countless cultivators who are more outstanding and more talented than you. Chapter 1798. The White Tiger Hall Master, Jianghu, was more solemn. Every time a new disciple joined the Tiangang sect, he had to sound the alarm. After obtaining very good results in the assessment competition, these young people were bound to endure all kinds of flattery and fawning after returning home. In this way, many cultivators would lose their nature and think that they were outstanding enough. However, such thinking was absolutely not allowed in the Tiangang sect. The Tiangang sect itself was a place where the survival of the fittest prevailed. Compared to the environment these cultivators lived in previously, this place was even crueler. As long as one's strength was not strong enough, they would be the target of everyone's ridicule. He wanted to tell all the new disciples that in this place, they had to rein in their previous pride and complacency. In this place they were newcomers who had nothing. Following Jianghu's words, Gong Shaoqing and the others' hearts all trembled. The original joy and pride in their hearts were shattered with these words. During this period of time, their hearts had indeed been somewhat complacent because of their recent results. At this moment, after hearing Jianghu's words, they could not help but start to examine themselves. Even if they obtained good results in the assessment competition, they were probably at the bottom of the Tiangang sect. This was because many cultivators in the Tiangang sect were selected from the assessment competition. In addition, the previous cultivators had already stayed in the Tiangang sect to cultivate for such a long time. They really could not compare with the other party in any aspect. Understood. Everyone's faces were filled with seriousness. From now on, they had to let go of everything in the past and cultivate humbly and seriously. Jianghu's gaze swept across everyone. After seeing that everyone had an appearance of humbly accepting his teachings, he also revealed a satisfied expression. If the new disciples did not sound the alarm when they arrived at the sect, they would inevitably cause some trouble in the following period of time. They had all seen this before. Chapter 1799. After the four hall masters finished their speech, they stood up and left the assembly hall. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also followed the palace lords they had chosen and walked out. Boss, we'll go to White Tiger Hall first. When we have time, we'll come and find you. Yuan Xiaomen walked to Bailey Hongzhuang's side. She hadn't seen her boss for more than 2 months and originally wanted to talk to her more. She didn't expect that they were actually cultivating in different halls. Although they all belonged to Tiangang sect, it wouldn't be so easy to see each other often in the future. Tiangang sect's area was very large, and different halls were on different peaks. Although they could come and go, the distance wasn't close. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly. The future is long. We'll all be in Tiangang sect and have many opportunities to meet. Listening to Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Yuan Xiaomen also revealed a happy smile. Okay, although it's a pity that we can't cultivate in the same hall, but boss, I'll definitely work hard to cultivate. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. You can still see each other often. Come and find us often. Gong Shaoqing and Dong Fangyu also looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. Dong Fangyu was as bright and handsome as ever. Hongzhuang, I wanted to ask you how you've been in Tiangang sect during this period of time, but now there's no chance. Next time let's find a chance to get together. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded and smiled faintly. No problem, just come and find us. Cheng Hifeng also couldn't help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang. In Tiangang sect, Bailey Hongzhuang was really a doted existence. As early as the end of the assessment competition, Bailey Hongzhuang already knew that Cheng Hifeng and Yu Junfei were also Tiangang sect's disciples. She also felt a wave of amazement towards this miraculous fate. Although she almost fought with Cheng Hifeng and Yu Junfei before, in the end the conflict didn't develop to the maximum. Bailey Hongzhuang also had some admiration for Cheng Hifeng. After all, there were not many cultivators who were as smart and magnanimous as Cheng Hifeng. Being a smiling tiger was also one of his abilities. If it was an ordinary person, they wouldn't be able to do what Cheng Hifeng did. Cheng Hifeng smiled politely at Bailey Hongzhuang, as if nothing had happened during the assessment. As the saying goes, don't slap a smiling person. Cheng Hifeng had always been very thorough about this point. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang also nodded. Now they were all disciples of Tiangang sect. Compared to the situation of absolute competition in the past, they were now in the same team. Therefore there was no need for a tit for tat. When Yu Junfei saw Cheng Hifeng's reaction, he felt both jealousy and admiration. It had to be said that Cheng Hifeng's way of dealing with people was watertight. In this aspect he could not compare to Cheng Hifeng. Soon, the 4 hall masters headed in 4 different directions. Bailey Hongzhuang, Xia Jiqing, and Bai Junyu followed behind Qin Ai and walked in the direction of the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall. Although they had all been to Tiangang's sect, they hadn't been to the 4 main halls and didn't know what the situation was like. Bailey Hongzhuang had been staying in Tiangang's sect these days, but she hadn't been to other places except for Di Beichen's palace. Naturally, she didn't know where the Vermilion Bird Palace Hall was. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.